Welcome back. You're watching NewsX. My name is Vineet Malhotra, and you're looking at a special show in association with Business World. In fact, we've been doing this for a very long time. We have been gathering a lot of information as how the economy can be revived. Now, that is a very simple question, but the answer to that question is quite complex. It's quite intricate. It's quite complicated. And when you receive a multitude of responses, it's very difficult to consolidate them. But the general feeling so far has been that there's still that needs to be done by the people who run the country and by the people for whom the country is run. That is the MSMEs, the businesses, the people who in fact go around, from pillar to post, trying to make sure that they are able to sell products and create some sort of a demand. And we have a very interesting panel with us who's going to give us ideas. They're going to pick out specific problems that perhaps might have not been taken into consideration by the government when the stimulus package was announced just a few days back. But hey, it's the first time that any country in the last 100 at least, 100 years at least, has been dealing with a pandemic such as this. The last time it was the Spanish flu, but that happened in 1918. So this is this century's pandemic, and we have to focus on what can be done about it. Joining me on the show is Mr. Monish G. Chatrat, Managing Partner, MDC Global Risk Advisory, Ms. Meghna Suryakumar, Founder and CEO of Credit Watch, Mr. Ananta Bhargava, Founder and MD of Enercent, Mr. Nityanand Sharma, Founder and CEO of Simple Technologies Private Limited, Mr. Vishant Kotian, Founder and CEO of Point of View Brandcom, Mr. Manpreet Singh Kochar, Founder and CEO of A&M Studio. And last but not the least, my co-anchor, my partner in crime for this endeavor for the next 1 hour, Dr. Anurag Batra, Chairman and Editor-in-Chief of Business World and Exchange.
This doctor comes because you're permanent head damage. Some people call it passion, hunger, desire. So I don't
All right.
give it to you.
Yeah.
See why I have a PhD.
Yes, exactly. In fact, Mr. Manish, let me start by asking you, how pleased or displeased were you with the stimulus package? Okay, let me in fact amplify my question over here. Do you think that the stimulus package was efficacious enough? And if it was not, do you think that something more solid was needed in the short run, and perhaps what the stimulus package gave us was something more for the 6-month to 18-month period?
Reed, I think, it's not just a matter of what the government does. I think we need to work in partnership. So it's an unprecedented time for not just the government, as you said, but also for all of us as entrepreneurs, and also for several of organizations who are dealing with a crisis-like situation. So while the stimulus package is a step forward, I think the important aspect, as it applies in any case when you come up with a new legislation or new set of reforms, is to track it. Is to actually see as to whether the intended benefits are actually being felt and are working in the right direction. So I think that's an element which I would probably say is a very important area of focus, which is to see as to whether the intended benefits are actually reaching the requisite recipients. So that's the first part of it. The second part of it is in terms of ourselves. We can't just be dependent on the government to come up with stimulus packages. I think we need to have our own different change in terms of mindset. This is the time for us to introspect. This is the time for us to integrate our thought process. This is the time for us to consolidate. And for this, we need to find a new path to growth. And that cannot happen without innovation. So I would say, insofar as that aspect is concerned, there have been a lot of organizations who have come up with innovation. But the important aspect out here has been not to panic. It is a crisis. But the moment you start panicking, you've lost the battle.
So we can sum up what you have said, by quoting John F. Kennedy, that ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. All right. Ms. Meghna, in fact, Anurag, you wanted to come in.
Monish, when you talk to your clients, you do both advisory and audit. You have two separate entities. When you talk to your clients, which are fairly mid-sized and large companies, what is the sentiment you get from founders and CEOs?
Well, the sentiments that we are seeing is that they are all willing to embrace change. The only aspect is that, it is a struggle. It is a struggle because different industries have their own set of problems. So each industry has its own set of problems. I think innovation is key, and the way in which we've seen our clients react, respond, has been, fairly encouraging. They've all, sort of. I think the most important aspect, for the medium side and smaller organizations has been that you've got to be relevant to be alive. And for the larger organizations, it's been as to how is it that they can put a further stamp of authority on their leadership by setting the tone and embarking on a path which serves as a point of encouragement for the others. So innovation is key, and we've seen that happen all across.
Okay, Meghna, your opening comments on how the stimulus package is playing out and where do you think the economy is headed?
Sure. So, when the stimulus package was announced in, March and April, it seemed like a good start because when you couple that with the credit, guarantee scheme that came about, it was a very strong show of support towards the industry. But now, what has actually happened in the past few months in terms of the ground reality is that only 10-15% of that has been sanctioned, and very few percentage of that has actually been dispersed. And also, we see that this is only for customers who already have existing relationships with the financial institutions. So this offers very little for new to credit MSMEs per se, right? Who are basically the ones who are in dire need at this point. So that's been one of the not so great things about this the scheme that started well, but what has happened at the ground level. We also noticed that a lot of private banks and NBFCs, they've kind of increased the threshold of what they want to, when they want to assess a borrower, which means that then not much lending activities really happened, right, in the past few months. It's almost zero. And all of these schemes are being kind of dispersed through, PSUs and cooperative banks. So from that perspective, also, we have not seen really a lot, in terms of scaling of this, right, there's still another 85% of that money to be dispersed. So we feel like that at this point, we also need to look at what do we do for new to credit MSMEs who are actually cash starved.
In fact, Meghna, the biggest question that everybody in the business and economic domain is asking, when will the liquidity come back? When will the demand come back? Do you have an answer to that?
So, from our perspective, we feel that if we have to kind of now together, like Manish rightly said, there has to be a partnership, come up with solutions specifically to help the small businesses. And this has to be done with a slew of government policies and also a lot of initiatives from the industry itself. Right? If you look at a lot of financial products and services, they're largely designed for the larger customer. Right? If you look at, let's say, credit assessment products, rating products, all of these are kind of largely designed to evaluate a larger business. We don't have specific products, services, and rating assessment products to suit MSMEs per se. So there has to be now a very deep partnership between financial institutions, the government, and the industry to kind of now cater specifically to solving the problem for the MSMEs and to ensure that they get access to working capital so that they can create more jobs. And when there are more jobs and salaries dispersed, that's when the demand will increase, right, for goods and services.
Okay.
All right, Mr. Anand Bhargav.
Yes.
Yeah. Hi, Vineet, and hi, Dr. Batra.
Hi.
Good.
Hi. What did you make of the stimulus package? Did it, like they say in Disneyland, did it float your boat?
Not yet, and we were born optimists, but now we're becoming increasingly cautiously optimistic. The liquidity hasn't come into our hands yet, and we're still talking to our bankers. We're still talking to everybody in the ecosystem to show us the way and show us the light where this stimulus package is. We do believe that certain sectors probably should get much more benefit than others. As a EV charging company, we really want the automotive sector to be bailed out. And the reason for that is a lot of countries have done that. Indian automotive sector is ripe to get into EVs. I think it's the wrong time for them to be derailed. Already they were in a slowdown. Then the impact, no manufacturing happening. Manufacturers are crunched with liquidity. We ourselves are not able to source our chargers per se. Liquidity is really it's a reality, and we are dealing with it. And God help us so. The second one is maybe after we hit the liquidity problem, B2B might pick up. But what about the consumer? we actually want to create the demand as well, right? We were actually hoping a lot of EV companies would launch this year in full flow, and that has the demand. I think is going to be derailed by about 2 to 3 quarters. These are two pending things that we're still evolving every single day. And as a founder and managing director, we are facing liquidity crunch, but at the same time, cautiously optimistic. But we're hoping, Vineet and Dr. Batra, you shows the way. But as MSME and startups, we really need some sort of a formal policy, and we need to abide by it. And we're hoping that we choose something and we stick by it for some time.
There is hope for your sector. The reason I say that is in China, the moment the lockdown was opened up, the demand for two-wheelers went up, four-wheelers went up, EV vehicles went up. So because the personal mobility will become more important than ever, possibly your sector in the near short term itself will benefit from it. We'll come back to you, Mr. Sharma. Nityanand, what's been your response to the economic stimulus, and where do you see the Indian economy being headed?
Yeah. Are you cautiously optimistic or are you cautiously pessimistic?
That's a new term we need, cautiously pessimistic.
So to answer the second question, I am cautiously optimistic 18 months out, but my view of the first 18 months are quite, I wouldn't say pessimistic is not the right word. It's a reality. We are in the biggest pandemic the world has ever seen. It is at the scale and the impact of like world wars, like, globally, the whole world is almost shut down. So we can't underplay this. The economy of the world is so interconnected, and it's quite fragile that, you break something, you don't know what will just, dominoes could fall, right? So, which is why I think the realistic thing to kind of like plan around is the next 12, 18 months, we all need to buckle up a little bit. And I think there is probably nothing else, I don't think there could be any other planning around that. 18 months out, 24 months out, I am actually very, very optimistic. And the reason I'm very optimistic is two things. Even before the pandemic, there was a lot of, understanding in the world that, we had a global financial crisis, balance sheets were not the strongest, and we did only monetary stimulus and fiscal, like basically money, we use money to solve a lot of fundamental problems in the economy. And typically, if you look at economic history over hundreds of years or thousands of years, what you see is there are these 80-year cycles, which are typically disrupted by massive global events. It could be a world war, it could be a pandemic, it could be anything. And after that, what happens is capital stock is readjusted, economy kind of like, all the weeds are taken off, and, it just is a much more fertile place for the next 80 years of growth. But those, I don't know, 2 to 4, 6 years are probably not a lot of fun. That's kind of like my view. But to your first question, the stimulus itself, as you all know, the size is huge. It's almost 10% of our GDP, which is roughly the size, the percentage of GDP what some of the United States and Japan are doing. And one thing we should know is US can do a lot of these things by printing money, but an emerging market like India cannot print money, right? So it is a lot more heavy on our balance sheet as a country to do that type of stimulus. So that's number one. But I think it's important to do. For the reason I said, we can't have a breakage, right? Money flows from MSMEs to consumers to banks, then banks back to, it goes the whole circle, and you cut it off, and then whole thing can come apart, right? So that's a risk, that Six Sigma risk that we should never be even trying.
We'll come back to you on when the demand will come back, and hence the circulation of money will be the way you describe. But for now, it has been impacted. Vishant, what's your response to stimulus as an entrepreneur? And when you talk to your clients, what do you hear from them?
Okay. So I'd like to sort of break up the conversation into two phases. One was the immediate response of companies towards the pandemic, so to speak, right? So the first immediate response was absolute chaos in terms of supply disruptions, right? So the so the real conversation you're having at that point in time is not marketing led. It's not about business as usual kind of conversations. The conversation at that point in time was, okay, hold up, we have to discuss health and safety first. We have to discuss supply related disruptions. We have to figure out how do we produce what we produce, or how do we create the service that we sell in the marketplace, right? So while that was a key consideration somewhere around April, the conversation has shifted quite a bit at this point in time, right? And I suspect some of it has got to do with, let's say, the announcement that the government has announced. When I look at the financial package and the contours of the financial package, right, it's largely on the supply side, right? There isn't so much of a demand side kind of stimulus package that I can see, which has got two basic qualities, which is that it's direct and it's measurable, right? So if you ask somebody, you ask a layperson, what will that package translate into for me on a day-to-day basis, either in monetary terms or in any other terms, right? They will not be able to give you a clear answer regarding it. So while that is a basic response to, let's say, the stimulus package, right? What I'm definitely seeing is that companies are now getting up and saying that, okay, there's a point up to which we can be reactive. There's a point up to which we can really just stop and say that, okay, we will wait. But there is a time when we have to respond, and we have to proactively respond. Now, the proactive response that I'm seeing from clients is in terms of not necessarily transactional kind of a conversation, which is a business as usual kind of a conversation with clients. But if you look at examples in the space, and these are not necessarily companies that we work with, like, for example, L'Oreal. L'Oreal is making hand sanitizers. Who would have thought, right? So companies are figuring a way to stay relevant during the pandemic in a way that paves the way for a future transaction, right? As far as demand on the kicking in, my sense is that if you look at any figures, right? You look at World Bank figures. Our economy is likely to contract by about 3.2%, right? In 2020, and in 2021, it's likely to increase only by about around 3% or thereabouts, right? So impact of the pandemic is real. The impact is going to continue to be real for at least a 12 to 15 month cycle. But what you have to also kind of figure out is that, sure, during a pandemic, there is a reprioritization of demand where consumers are concerned, right? But there is a pent up demand for a lot of things that people were consuming before the pandemic, right? Now you could put them in the conspicuous category, but that pent up demand remains, and it's likely to kick in around 12 to 15 months into this entire effort, and it will be aided by some of the efforts that companies will undertake, both on the organizational side and on the for example on the brand side. On the organizational side,
on demand creation side.
So for example, let's look at,
does create demand.
Absolutely,
it does. Demand. If not, it does bring out the demand. Manpreet, you come in the entertainment sector, the performing arts sector, that has been totally ravaged. I know you've gone online to kind of mitigate that loss. But tell us, what are your reactions to the economic meltdown in the last 3 months, and where do you see the Indian economy?
Hi, Anurag. Yeah. Okay, firstly, I'd like to actually say that, what Munish said, I would second his point in terms of saying that the stimulus package is not something to be depended upon, because that is not processed down to the last level. It is not reaching out even to the entertainment companies, which are mostly fall into the 90% category of MSMEs, and those companies don't really know the process of how to avail that. So we have to be totally dependent. And what our Modi ji said, Atmanirbhar, is exactly what we need to process internally now with us. Well, yes, the performing arts industry has taken the biggest hit, because it is absolutely not possible to have any public gatherings. So live industry has taken the maximum hit of not gaining any revenues to the artists and to the people connected with it. So what is it that we had to innovate? We had to go digital, which almost every particular platform did go. on the online section, started creating content out there, started creating a collective series of concerts, started also now at about almost 2 months later post the pandemic, there were petitions signed that, artists and the artist community needs to now get paid, which was not getting done. Nobody understood where is it going actually. So now it's the time when the remuneration has started flowing into the artists, to the musicians, and that will start the conviction in the overall sector of industry, both at the receivers end, which is the artists and musicians, and at the client side, clients which are the event companies, wedding planners, and also consumers, who have started doing the remuneration processes to the event companies as well as to the artists. So that way the cycle is
So
just
not the
about
same value,
started.
not the same values though, right?
Not the same
Value has
value.
come down substantially.
Value has substantially come down to almost close to about 20% of the actual value. But because the experience of live entertainment versus digital entertainment is also of a low value, so artists can also understand. But the process has started. We as the company, we've already done about close to 4 digital big concerts. We've had a very huge brand growth on our side. We've expanded our markets. We've expanded our talent numbers. Also, because of the visibility that we were able to get worldwide, we also started one more element I would need to add to what Manish said, collaborations. So collaborations and innovations is something which this pandemic made every entrepreneur, every marketer, every salesperson across the world come up with new ideas. So did we. And that's exactly what is the need of the hour, to come up with alternative ideas to start the revenue process flowing. Like you said, the process of money needs to go into the market, and that's when the economy will slowly start building up.
Okay. What me and Vineet have encountered over the last few weeks is that, different set of entrepreneurs have different expectations, experiences, and, outlook to what should be done by the government. And that there we have entrepreneurs who believe that, they have to make the best of what exists and kind of pivot around that and build a model that is more, let's say, conducive to this collaborative, contactless, caring economy. So we'll come back to that. But Monish and
We'll take a short break. Yeah.
I agree with you that we need to be, self-reliant in the way we come up with new business models, keeping the new abnormal in mind.
If I can come to you now, we have spoken of the problem. We have assessed the situation. We have also, more or less reached a consensus that the government cannot get into specifics. The stimulus package was a stroke with a broad brush. The government does not even have the time. And that is why AATMANIRBHAR has been promulgated by the government. But is it really the best time to be gunning for AATMANIRBHAR? In a time, in a situation when, the existing or the pre-existing system finds itself dismantled and disoriented, how can you can gun or aspire for another system to replace it? Or do you think we have no choice?
See, there's never a good time or a bad time for, initiatives like this. I think the important aspect is that this is happening in the backdrop of not just an economic challenge that we all are seeing, but there are also developments that are taking place across the borders. And I think, it is not an easy one, because, you have to find a blend, and you have to be a little aggressive and forward-looking as you do so. As I said earlier, it's not about panicking. It's about having the courage of conviction that, yes, certain things can be done. Nothing changes overnight. Things happen over a period of time. And I think the important aspect out here is to make a very clear assessment of the risks that organizations would face when they're adapting a change to the new normal. These have to be done gradually. We find that the various ministries of the union government are fairly open to suggestions. This is, as I said earlier, probably the first time, and as you said as well, in the last 100 years that we are facing a situation like this. We don't know when we're going to come out of this. So it has to be, as we've also been saying, a collaborative effort. So the simple answer to your question is that there's never a good time or a bad time. The important aspect is to take a decision, chart the way forward, and work in collaboration with industry bodies and the organizations. And I think that's where consulting firms like ours have to play a very important role, because in this situation of adversity, there lies an opportunity. There lies a financial opportunity, and there lies an opportunity to give back to the society, and to give back to our clients. The choices are very clear. And what we've chosen to do in a time like this is to actually give back. So the entire repository of good practices, best practices, controls, thought leaderships, we've channelized our entire efforts, irrespective of whether these are billable or not billable, towards taking back to our clients, to the industry bodies, aspects, and in a sense, to serve as an effective conduit. So interesting times beneath, no clear answers. But again, if there is an initiative, direction of the type that you've outlined, I think we all need to rally behind it, and we need to make it work. That's the difference between success and failure.
Right. Meghna, the government banned about 59 applications of Chinese origin just a few days back. How do you look at that? You think that's a brilliant opportunity for companies within India to fill up the ranks? And that is perhaps a path that has been shown by the government, to go for Atmanirbharta.
Yes, I mean, the government did ban 59 applications, and that was much more of a political move, diplomatic move, to send a message to the Chinese companies. But for me, when I look at it as an entrepreneur, right, we have entrepreneurs in India building apps for a global playground. And we have, institutional VCs from across the world supporting Indian VCs. So this, something like this, when this happens, it should not send a wrong message that India is not an open playground for global businesses to come and expand and offer services worldwide, and the same way for global investors to come and participate and support the growth of Indian companies.
Megha, just if I could take a counter view here, China has done business with the world on its terms. You have to have a Chinese partner. The data has to look. Why can't India do that? We are not saying don't do business in India. We're saying our data should be ours. It should stay in India. We do business with you, but on our terms. If you want to access our market, then you do business the way we want you to do. So there may be learnings. India can learn from China some things on how to support homegrown companies to grow big. Of course, we'll have to bring the cost of capital down. That's the number one. Then is the acquisition of land, especially in context to manufacturing. The third is reform in labor laws, which has happened to some extent, but we still have a long way to go there. So I think we can learn from China on how to help homegrown companies to be big while getting investments in that country. At this point, Manpreet, do you really believe digital experiences can replace physical experiences even when COVID goes away? Or we as human beings will go back to that experiential economy?
Well, because of the coming in of the digital experience, it is not to go out now. That is for sure. We've been working almost 20 years closely. Corporates opted in for webinars 20 years back, 15 years back. That's not gone out. We're using it more effectively now. Corporates reduce their travel costs and their hospitality costs and their meeting and conferences costs because of webinars and using technology. So they optimize on this fact that because technology can help, they can reduce costs. So has the consumer become that smart and that understanding now that they are using artists on a digital platform, they've also understood the fact that they can still do their internal employees events, which have started happening, internal and external customer events, which are mixed also with artists included. That has reduced their costs to almost 80%. So this is to stay, but yet you can never ever have the.
So will we move to a hybrid model? Will we move to a hybrid model at
Yes,
some stage?
absolutely, absolutely.
And
There will be a mix of
yeah. Where do
coming
you,
from a corporate background.
where do you see the Indian economy going? I want to ask you, in the next 3 months to 5 months, do you see Indian economy being better than now, being worse than now?
3 months to 6 months, no movements. It's not going to be this. It's not going to be this fast at all. It will chart showing very gradual increase over a period of 12 months till 36 months because of the hit and the back gears that they've come on. So it's not going to show any signs in the next 3 months or 6 months, as per my industry and as per my gut, being in the corporate environment for about close to 25 years now. Yeah.
Vishal, same question to you. Indian economy is going to be better in 3 months to 5 months, or is going to be worse than what it is?
So my view is that any effort that a corporate or an organization takes tends to have a lagged effect, right? And right now, with every client that we're talking to, or even clients that we don't handle with, if you look at the movement on their side, right, there seems to be some understanding that okay, there is a solution to be had on the supply side. There is a solution to be had on the distribution side. So companies are starting to now figure out a way, and cleverly so, to be able to deliver that product or service that they were doing, even if it might be in a truncated sense. So where I agree in that in a 3 to 6 months time, it's not going to be drastically better. I don't think it's going to get any worse than where we are currently, because I think we may have seen the worst of the pandemic. Unless I'm proven completely wrong. I mean, there are countries like Korea and certain other countries where there has been
Indonesia.
yeah, exactly, where they've seen a rerun of the COVID virus because of the opening up of the economy. So we might have those cycles, but I'd like to believe that India as a country, we have the benefit of having seen Western countries go through these cycles, and there are learnings to be had. And when I mean learnings to be had, I don't just mean at an organization level, at a country level, even at a personal level. Even now, you'll notice that where health, safety, and hygiene matters are concerned, people are a lot more on the ball. It's as simple as finding this little sanity kit as soon as you enter somebody's office, right? So those are the experiences I believe will help us as we go along, and I don't expect the economy to get any worse than where we are currently.
Okay, let me go to Mr. Bhargav and Mr. Sharma. Last 3 months has seen lots of startups seeing their revenues go to zero or close to zero, depending upon which sector you're in. And in the last 3 months, some have been able to raise money, some haven't been able to raise money. Do you see startups sustaining the next 3 to 6 months, or you see a substantial number of startups folding?
I think, very right question, Dr. Batra. But where we come from is, I think startups should have, listed out COVID as one of the disruptions probably by early March, and should have planned for it, because a lot of VCs were telling about it. Second, startups that are going to be dependent on supply chain, especially that's got anything to do with China, basically most of electronics, I think there's going to be a short-term disruption. And we are facing that. And overall, we also feel there might be reallocation of priorities from venture capitalists. So they might not continue to fund certain sectors that they had bankrolled before. But
they will not throw good money after bad money.
Yeah. So
are you referring to co-working as an industry and a Japanese investor?
Well, little more than that. We also believe that there's little more unit economics that will come into play right now. And we always believed, and as a bootstrap company, we always believed that, without external funding, we should sustain as a business and grow organically. But what has come to us is a lot of companies that are dependent on supply chain in China, they're getting out of business. So we had suppliers of EV chargers and electrical equipment who are slowly actually asking us, saying that, can you pay 100% advance rather than the credit terms?
Or maybe start making them, thinking about making them in India. That could be the positive disruption. And dare I say that, for the first time, marketing is becoming performance oriented. You're spending money in areas where you get a direct ROI. For the first time, I keep saying that the revenue is more than the cost. That's a very simple mathematical thing. But for the first time, founders and business owners are looking at their businesses like that. Mr. Sharma, your comments on what will happen to startups whose revenues have been impacted and who haven't been able to raise money?
Yeah, so Anurag, so basically you can divide startups in two parts. One are startups that are negatively impacted because of pandemic, and then there are startups that are actually, pandemic is actually good, accelerated, right? Zoom is one that we are on, right? So obviously, if you're on the other side, that's awesome. But if you're not, it's obviously not good. And I think, this is a time for entrepreneurs to be very good risk managers. As I think somebody mentioned, I think we all knew starting March that this is going to be pretty bad and we can keep on waiting. But I think, at least on our end, we did a bunch of things to just make sure that, we can survive a bad market for the next 18 months, right? And plan our business, plan our budgets, plan our revenue, etc. around that scenario. Because we all know if things are better, we can always adapt very quickly. Yeah, so that's kind of like my view. The entrepreneurs I'm talking to, startups I'm talking to, I find them very resilient. People are taking very tough measures around, either figuring out how to increase revenue or reducing cost to be able to, see this crisis through. And of course, there are some sectors that are very hot from investor point of view, and some sectors that are not, right? And as entrepreneurs, people are just on a mission to make sure 18 months out, they are there, they've survived, and they're actually a better company. One thing that I think this is definitely bringing to forelight, which we just talked about, is unit economics, right? Over the last 10 years, I think we were in this market of fairly cheap capital, sometimes, capital from GMV, or it's very easy to sell, dollar bill for 90 cents, right? As they say, but that's not a business. And that in cheap markets, in cheap free capital markets or abundant capital markets, there is a case to be said that, hey, we will grow to this scale and we'll lose a lot of money, but after that we'll, make a lot of money, and maybe it'll be 5 years or 10 years. Right now, obviously, those plans are just not feasible. So, I think there is a renewed focus on unit economics, which I think is a good thing for entrepreneurs themselves, because in the end, I think every entrepreneur's responsibility is to bring your business to a point where your customers are paying for you, right? As opposed to you're just raising money all the time. So, I think there are some good things, as I said. I think 18 months out, a lot of people coming out of it will be just better companies, better, entrepreneurs, better businesses. But I think we'll have a fair amount of, ups and downs in the next 18 months. That's what we think people should be planning for, because, that's being a good risk manager.
Right. Nika, what does this do to new businesses? Do you think that, there is an opportunity now from what's going on right now, but at the same time, there are a lot of businesses that might not even survive by the time the pandemic is over. But at the same time, there will be new areas which are cropping up, as we see on a regular basis: sanitizers, masks, temperature control systems, and all that stuff. So do you think, the opportunity that is coming up is going to overshadow, the exit worries as well for some companies? Because, if you're leaving this business behind, there is more opportunity for you to do this now.
So it's actually a little bit of both. If the essential services has presented a huge opportunity for a lot of businesses, for new businesses to come up, and for existing businesses to kind of realign to start providing essential services, because the demand has been very high for essential services. So we've seen that, and that's been a very good, sign for those businesses who are providing essential services. Second is, we've seen businesses becoming resilient and adopt. So, for example, restaurant systems are investing in a complete, automated zero human touch process to kind of deal with their own customers who come into a restaurant. So a lot of businesses are now, small businesses are now adopting to technology to survive and be resilient to the pandemic. So we see that as a huge wave, right? And if we look at MSMEs per se, we see that as a trend of small businesses now adapting to technology like they never did before. And that I think is going to be a very positive thing post this, in what we're going to get out of this, right? So even if you look at the government, they said now let's ease banking, let's do video KYC. That means there's a huge surge of fintech companies that are investing in different kind of digital technologies to do paperless onboarding, and that's been a huge opportunity for companies who are already in that business as a fintech company, and for new companies to kind of build technology around that. So I think technology-driven solutions to either be resilient or to pivot to a new business that is much more viable than what you are currently doing would be is a key way that businesses can survive, learn, adapt, and try to get more profitable. Adapting to the new normal.
Okay,
Yeah.
Vinit, go ahead. What I was going to ask everyone is, see, when you talk to every entrepreneur, it boils down to what is the demand, in most segments. The demand, except for hygiene and sanitation products or healthcare, which is forced right now because of COVID, and people move towards a healthier lifestyle. Those are things that have been extreme. But overall, the demand is tepid, and I'm being kind. As you know, when the malls opened, some of those shops in the malls did not get a single visitor for the first 3 days, 4 days. So when do you see the demand coming back, and what do you think can be done by each stakeholder to bring the demand back? The key to the Indian economy being revived is getting back the demand. So I would want a response from everyone. We could start with Bhargav. Yes.
Yeah, I do believe, I think access to capital really has to eat both at the consumer level and as well as the enterprise level. We do believe people need to have, every single person that I know from the US either has received $2,400 a month back and are waiting for another one. So we're not going to get that. But I do believe...
Where in India, when in Rome, behave like the Romans do. Where in India, let's just say we are not the US.
I agree.
And we don't have the, fiscal leeway of what they can do. They can print roads.
True.
Like,
but Dr. Batra, I do believe if liquidity problem for enterprises which are employing a lot of people who make the kind of money, who continue to be the middle class, right? Are engineers per se, who actually are middle class people who go and buy decent amount of segment C cars, and that demand is only possible when we are able to employ them. And we were actually gonna go on a rampage in hiring. Now we're going so cautiously in terms of adding even high-level executives that maybe we're not able to create that kind of employment per se. So we do believe some sort of liquidity and to enterprises that employ people, which in turn creates demand, needs to be there. And I also believe consumer credit possibly has to be a little more easier than before. And I'm hopeful that someone will find a way of solving the consumer liquidity crunch, but we need to create jobs. We need to sustain jobs, and more clarity on that will only, give clarity for end consumer as well.
Okay. We now want to make a point.
Yeah. So I agree with Bhargav, right? Creating jobs and creating working capital, for small businesses is the way to go to solve this problem. So from that perspective, I think it's very important for the policy and also the institutions to kind of take a relook at the way they offer working capital to these companies, right? Because, post-COVID, there are two kinds of businesses. Some that just cannot be revived, no matter what you do. And some which are good businesses, but if you just, right now, they'd run out of money. But if you infuse capital and the right amount of capital, then they can get back on their feet. And then that would create jobs, employment, and help in further fueling the demand. So what the focus now is to support those companies that are good businesses, but are just short of money at this point. We can't do much. There are about 25% of businesses that are going to get wiped out. There's nothing much we could do about that. But there are companies who are good companies, businesses that can survive, small businesses, mid-size, large, all shapes and sizes, that have a good business outlook, but just don't have the money. So if we focus policy and finance, focus to solve that problem so that we can create jobs, right? That's what's going to solve the problem, and that's what I strongly feel.
Okay, Vishal.
See, my sense is that companies will have their own response mechanism to be able to manage their liquidity issues. Okay, it also, to a very large extent, depends on where you were before the pandemic, right? So we were already in that in a recessionary environment, irrespective of the pandemic, right? So if as a company you didn't have the fundamentals in place, right? Post-pandemic, those companies are going to fold up, and that's the honest truth of life, right? I was just reading some stats. In the last 3 months, almost 14 crore jobs have got wiped out of the market in India alone, right? So that's a fairly telling statistic, right? And like I mentioned, right, at this point in time, a lot of business owners will struggle with saying that, okay, is there a direct and measurable way in which I can assess what the stimulus package will do for my business, right? The truth is, this word Atmanirbhar, right, is something that we should not be taking we should not use that word lightly, right? Because the truth is, as an organization, you need to be able to do whatever it is that you need to be able to do to either continue to create value or pivot in a way where you figure out what is going to be the source of a value for your organization. So, for example, in the marketing and the marketing and the creative businesses, right? If you were an organization that didn't really understand digital marketing, you didn't understand digital in the broader sense of the word, right? You're probably going to be going to go out of business. You're going to be irrelevant. So either you attrite very quickly, you figure things out. Like one of the panelists was mentioning the fact that they have quickly attracted to live events. That the truth is, the definition of a live event today is a Facebook live event or a Zoom live event, right? So you need to be able to attract very, very quickly to this solution or to this.
Prashant, I have a point on that.
Sure.
In life, whatever is in scarcity, the heart goes fonder for that. So right now, physical interface, face-to-face interface in the true whole world is in scarcity. So when there is a vaccine, when Corona has gone away, I think we will get back to some of those things. We may not get back because we have discovered more efficient ways of doing the same digitally, but I believe that the value of a physical contact or a physical experience will go up even further. So that's my view, but let's get Nitya's final view and Monish's final view. Nitya?
Yeah. So I think when I see the demand side contraction, I think it's two clear verticals. One is the pandemic itself, meaning I can't go to restaurants. So obviously the demand there is going to be almost zero. And then there are obviously economic reasons where people will lose job and are losing jobs, and then their ability to buy things. The second, I guess the pandemic is obviously a very important thing that we are all trying to take care of, and hopefully the vaccine will come and we'll go out and like eat our foods and meet friends at bars. But I think economic is very important, and if not managed well, could have this very long-term impact. So also, in my opinion,
social impact, people going out of jobs, lower strata going out of jobs, social unrest.
Yeah,
those are issues we've not yet factored in this discussion, but they are real.
Yeah, and in that, right, I mean, I think the right approach, at least for India, is not the US style, drop the check in your mailbox, but making sure the jobs are not getting lost. So I think the support to smaller businesses or large businesses or service sector and so on should be there, so that they can continue to employ people, and in spite of the fact that there is a demand side shock and probably they don't have the economics to pay for them, if they are supported through credit or fiscal policies, so that they can choose not to let go of too many people. I think when we come out of this in 12 months, 18 months, whenever, we will be in a much better position to be able to move forward.
Okay, Nitya.
Okay.
Your final comment, Manpreet, very quick one, and Monish, your final comment.
Yeah, then we wrap up. Yeah. One element to be added is the fact that besides those hospitality businessmen who are not able to get the customers in, they very quickly invented the cloud kitchens. Multiple restaurant owners who could bear the costs of starting new startups of cloud kitchens have started that. Those who were owners of bars and nightclubs, they very quickly found out the channels to also entertain their clientele by having the DJs operating on digital platforms and live entertainers also operating on digital platforms, and while taking care of the hospitality by cloud kitchens. And like the way we started this particular subject, that multiple new businesses have opened up because many homemakers have started businesses out of their cooking skills.
Sure.
So there are opportunities where people have optimized on this skill.
We Monish, so final few quick one.
Yeah. Okay.
So
20
my-
seconds to you, Manish, and then we wrap up.
Sure. COVID has changed our life forever. There is no going back to the old order. Whoever goes back to the old order will not survive. You have to define the new. And one way to define the new order is not to, sort of bring the demand to where you are, is to go to where the demand is. And if you are not getting what you're looking for, create that demand.
True.
Absolutely. That was well articulated. And on that note, we're going to end this fabulous discussion that we have had with some of the most striking business minds in the country. And thank you for being here. Thank you for taking out the time and giving us your unique perspective on this predicament that not only India but the world finds itself in. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vineet. Thank you, Anurag.
Thank you.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.